Yeah, a few weeks back, I received a call from Cray asking if I could share the Word of God with us this morning. And potentially, I really didn't think so much about it. And potentially, I should have asked for more time and say, okay, I'll do it another time. But nevertheless, today I stand before you, surrendered to God, that His will be done, and that He will speak through me. I'm just a vessel, and I believe that God this morning wants to speak to us. And I pray that we will be attentive, that we'll give our hearts, and we'll receive His word with faith, because that is what He desires. So I'll be sharing on a topic that I call Choosing Right. And together with you, we will be exploring and pick some lessons from a somewhat familiar story, as recorded in 1 Samuel, chapter number 8, from verse 1 to 22. Yeah, if you could turn with me there, and then we can read. We'll try to unpack the scriptures, and we'll learn from just the main themes there. So the Bible says, "Now it came to pass, when Samuel was old, that he made his sons judges over Israel. The name of his firstborn was Joel, and the name of his second was Abijah. They were judges in Beersheba. But his sons did not walk in his ways. They turned aside after dishonest gain. They took bribes and perverted justice. Then all the elders of Israel gathered together and came to Samuel at Ramah and said to him, 'Look, you are old, and your sons do not walk in your ways. Now make us a king to judge us like all the nations.' But this thing displeased Samuel when they said, 'Give us a king to judge us.' So Samuel prayed to the Lord, and the Lord said to Samuel, 'Heed the voice of the people in all that they say to you. For they have not rejected you, but they have rejected me, that I shall not reign over them, according to all the works which they've done since the day that I brought them out of Egypt, even to this day, with which they have forsaken me and served other gods. So they are doing to you also.'" Verse 9, "Now therefore heed their voice. However, you shall solemnly warn them and show them the behavior of the king who will reign over them." Verse 10, "So Samuel told all the words of the Lord to the people and asked, who asked for a king. And he said, 'This will be the behavior of the king who will reign over you.'" And I'd like us to just note the behavior of the king who was going to reign over Israel. "He will take your sons and appoint them for his own chariots and to be his horsemen, and will run before his chariots. He will appoint captains over his thousands and captains over his 50s. He will set some to plow his ground and reap his harvest, and some to make his weapons of war and equipment for his chariots. He will take your daughters to be perfumers, cooks, and bakers, and he will take the best of your fields, your vineyards, and your olive groves, and give them to his servants. He will take a tenth of your grain and your vintage, and give it to his officers and servants. And he will take your male servants, your female servants, your finest young men, and your donkeys, and put them to his work. He will take a tenth of your sheep, and you will be his servants. And you will cry out in that day because of your king, whom you have chosen for yourselves. And the Lord will not hear you in that day." Nevertheless, the people refused to obey the voice of Samuel, and they said, "No, but we will have a king over us, and we will be like all the nations, and that our king may judge us and go out before us and fight our battles." And Samuel heard all the words of the people, and he repeated them in the hearing of the Lord. So the Lord said to Samuel, "Heed their voice and make them a king." And Samuel said to the men of Israel, "Every man go to his city." So we see the scene introduced to us is that Samuel, who at this point had been serving as a judge, as a priest, and as a prophet to the people of Israel, was actually getting more advanced in age. And under his leadership, as can be attested by what the elders were saying, it was very successful. Israel had victories, and their enemies, they had victories over their enemies, and God had provided them long periods of peace as a nation. Samuel's long service had been the hallmark of integrity and wholehearted devotion to God, as is testified by the people's elders. So when the elders are coming to Samuel and they are saying, give us a king because your sons are not walking in your ways, I think that is basically a testament that over the years that you've ruled over us, over the years that you've been a leader for us, you have reigned in integrity. You've reigned in ways that God really is glorified in this place. And we've known peace, we've come to get abundance, if I will say something like that. But behold, you've put for us sons, your sons, as leaders over us, but they're not walking in your ways. And I can't help but relate this to our lives. If I was to come to the people that you work with, the people that you interact with, the people that you live with, your family members, and I ask them, what will you say about that person? If you come to my family and you ask my wife or the people that are basically living in my house and you say, what will you say about Peter? I think that is a challenge. But for Samuel here, the leaders of Israel are saying you've walked in the right way and your sons are actually deviating from it. So I leave us that kind of like a thought for us to think, what will people, if they're given a chance and they say with all honesty, how is this person? But because Samuel is growing old, he needs support. He's basically staying in a town called Ramah, and there is a place which is a little bit further from where he's staying. And as he's getting old, he cannot travel to all these places. So he sees here an opportunity that I have two sons. I've raised them well. When you look at the names of their sons, they actually talk about God being their father and God being their God. And I think it's basically Samuel saying, I have lived with these sons of mine. I have seen their work with the Lord. I can actually entrust leadership unto these sons. Otherwise, how do you explain that a man who has had a leadership or a service, which is a hallmark of integrity, will choose to put his reputation on the line? But the ability of his sons to discharge their duties impartially and in accordance with the laws of God doesn't come to work well for Samuel. The decision comes back to haunt him as his sons veer from his righteous path that he himself had walked. They are enticed by money. Yes, they are enticed by money. And they take bribes. And the result of them taking bribes is that they are going to be perverting justice. When they are called to judge the people of Israel or the people of Beersheba, where they'd actually been sent there, what is going before them is before they see the case, they will be seeing the money that has been given to them. And I believe most of us have example of what you've seen this playing in our real world. The Israelites are given a perfect opportunity here that they've been waiting for. Yes, for a long time, as God was saying in those scriptures, these people have been turning away from me. Their hearts are not for me. They've always wanted to run away. And you see, in them wanting a king, it's very interesting because if they come to Samuel and say, your sons are not walking in your ways, yeah? Let's inquire of God, or even talk to your sons, or even give us another judge. But the Israelites are coming in and saying, we want a king. And we don't want a king who is going to be to walk in your ways. We want a king so that we can be like the other nations around us. And mark you, the Israelites were a special people, and God had planted them in this land. And he told them, do away with the nations here. You shall not mingle with the nations around you. Otherwise, these are the nations that are going to be enticing you. And what what we see here is the Israelites have already interacted with the nations around them. The Israelites have gotten to the place whereby now what the other nations are structured is what is appealing to them. So they take this opportunity that they were eagerly waiting for and they ask for a king. And I want to ask us that in this competitive world, we need to be aware there are people that are waiting for you to fall. There are people that are waiting for you to make that wrong decision. There are people who are waiting to pounce at the slightest opportunity. This is the way that the devil works. He not only waits for you to fail, but he constantly throws temptations your way. It is important that we remain alert, especially on matters integrity, to avoid opening the door for the evil motives to win. From Samuel's end, however, the elder's request is more of a vote of no confidence on his leadership credentials. If somebody comes and tells you your children have failed, essentially, you are portraying one message, you're passing one message to us, but starting from your home, there is nothing that you're doing there. So I think what basically broke Samuel's heart is not like these people are essentially asking for a king, you know. That's part of it. But essentially here, his credentials as a leader, as a father, as a person who is able to bring up the sons in the right way, is actually called in question. So Samuel is understandably dejected, and he makes the wise decision to go to God in prayer. And this is what actually I find very interesting here. God comforts him. Yes, he has failed in some ways, or we can actually think that he might have failed in some ways. But God is the one that is comforting them, and he's telling them all along, this has been coming. It's not about you, Samuel. It is God himself that the Israelites are rejecting, as they have always done. And I ask myself, and I want to pose it to all of us today, when we are overwhelmed, when we don't know what is happening, when everything seems to be failing, when we are dejected, when we are at our lowest moments, where do we run to? Do we run to man? Do we run to try and find ways to fix this problem? Or do we run to God like Samuel here? What is essentially our safety net? What is our source of sure comfort and assurance? I think we pick a message here. Like Samuel, we should make the Lord our refuge, because he's not only faithful, but he can see beyond what we see. Because you might be making a decision because of what you see, but there is one that sees beyond what you see. And I pray that this morning we'll make the Lord our refuge. We will be gearing to run to God when things are not working. Let's not try to make them work by all means possible, as we will see from these people of Israel here. But let's run to God and say, God, what do you want me to do in this place? God, will you uplift my spirit? Will you uplift my soul? And I can assure you this morning that God is a sure source of comfort and refuge. So God sets the record straight that he will not stand on the way of their decision to have a human king. And possibly a reminder to you and me that God will not stand in our way sometimes when we push so hard to have things that God himself does not approve. But the Israelites, they lack the foresight, and they evidently are enticed by the glitters of what they see from the other nations. And in unison they say, away with you, God. Make way for the human king, that we can be like the other nations. It sounds familiar, right? Because many years later, the same script is playing out when Jesus is betrayed, arrested, prosecuted, and crucified. For those that have followed the latest series that we've been on the Lion and the Lamb that ended last week, you might be familiar with the happenings around the death and the resurrection of Jesus. So Judas betrays Jesus into the hands of the chief priests and the scribes. And the leaders have for long been threatened by the ministry of Jesus, because Jesus has been calling it as it is. They are hypocrites. Jesus was calling them, even if you are leaders, you're hypocrites. And this wasn't auguring well with the people, with the leaders of the people. Jesus was also getting a huge following because of the message that he was preaching. And this meant that the status quo was being challenged. So just like the Israelites who have been looking at, they too finally get their long-awaited opportunity to do away with Jesus and his movement. They have him arrested and charged on conflicting made-up charges. And since they cannot pass the death penalty, they change the charges once more and petition the Roman ruler Pilate to give them the death sentence. So we read in Luke 23, verse number 13, all the way to 25. They are before Pilate. So Pilate came together with the chief priests, that is Luke 23, from verse 13 to 25. So Pilate called together the chief priests, the rulers, and the people, and said to them, "You brought me this man as one who was inciting the people to rebellion. I've examined him in your presence, and have found no basis for the charges against him. Neither has Herod, for he sent him back to worse. As you can see, he has done nothing deserving death. Therefore I will punish him and then release him." But the whole crowd shouted, "Away with this man. Release Barabbas to worse." Barabbas had been thrown into prison for insurrection in the city and for murder. Wanting to release Jesus, Pilate appealed to them again. But they kept shouting, "Crucify him, crucify him." For the third time he spoke to them. "Why? What crime has this man committed? I've found in him no grounds for a death penalty. Therefore I will have him punished and then release him." But with loud shouts they insistently demanded that he be crucified. And their shouts prevailed. So Pilate decided to grant their demand. He released the man who had been thrown into prison for insurrection and murder, the one they asked for, and surrendered Jesus to their will. You know, Jesus will end up dying on the cross. But the beauty is that even death couldn't hold him. His dominion wasn't limited to the earth. His dominion was in the heavens. His dominion was acknowledged under the earth. And that is why glorious he rose on the third day, and he lives forever, never to die again. The two passages hold very important lessons, but I would like to just touch on two themes. The first one is the grave danger of spiritual blindness. You see, it's widely reported that adults make an estimated 35,000 decisions a day. So when you wake up and by the time you go to sleep, on average, 35,000 decisions a day. Some of those decisions are not only critical, they are life-changing. And our judgment has to be spot on. Among other things, we need to be conscious of the things that might cloud our decision-making process, which in essence make us blind. We are rarely able to make rational decisions when we are angry, when we are intoxicated, or when we are even depressed. For instance, I'm not at my best when I haven't slept enough. And that will actually influence the decisions that I make on that particular day. So in the scriptures that we've read, we see people blinded by three things. The first one is the trappings of power. It is Lord Acton, a renowned Englishman who lived in the 1800s, who said that power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. It speaks truth even to this day. Many people do well in the humble surroundings, but once elevation comes, once you're given that position, once you're given that place of influence, if we're not careful, the state of honor will often change men for the worse. Or it will reveal a person's character that had been hidden in meekness. You'll often hear people say, "This person has changed since he got 1, 2, 3. This person has changed since he became a manager. That person has changed since he got this particular position." So the two sons of Samuel totally lose it as well when they're set above the people. We have enough reason to believe that they were okay, they were good people. But power brings its own things. And we need to be careful of that. They misuse their positions for the highest bidder. And the chief priests, on the other hand, are ready to do anything to maintain the lofty positions that they had. If you're like me, you basically don't want to be stagnant. You want to grow. You want to matter. Let's face it, it's not enjoyable to be poor. It's not enjoyable to lack the basics. It's not enjoyable to be powerless. It's not enjoyable to be inconsequential, right? Yeah, even with this ambition to be better in mind, I should be aware that there are snares that arise with that uncontrolled ambition. We have examples of people looting public and private coffers. We have people that are defeating the justice systems and taking out lives, just they can maintain their position or even get others. It is my prayer that in this church, we will have very many powerful people here. But as you take those positions, as you become people of influence, remember to put in place accountability, systems for accountability, and checks to ensure that you're not blinded by power. We need to be aware that it is God that elevates us, and that we should use our positions of influence to further his kingdom by being like Christ. The second thing we see is the pressure to conform. You see, God had been king over the people of Israel, and it led them to great success in battles. He literally fought for them. If you read the chapter just before the one that we read in Samuel, God is thundering from heaven and causing confusion on the Philistines. If you read Exodus, Joshua, and Judges, you'll see a lot of examples where Israelites are literally doing nothing, and it is God that is fighting for them. Even in this, the Israelites still are blind, and they cannot see that their advantage is basically by having a supernatural king. They want to be limited. The desire to be like other nations not only blinds them, but also it deafens them from hearing what God is saying. Regardless of the warnings, they just want to sacrifice their identity and the advantage that they've enjoyed by being under God. You see, sometimes it can be uncomfortable to be the odd one out. Being the one that is not doing what everyone else is doing. I think it's okay to be deemed old school. It's okay to be irrelevant if the only thing that defines this relevance is dishonoring God. It's easy to compare ourselves with others, but as a child of God, I need to be more concerned about what God says about me and how I can glorify him. After all, as believers, we have a special identity in that we are a chosen people, we are a royal priesthood, we are a holy nation, we are God's special possession, and we've been called to give him praise. And Romans 12 verse 2 says it this way: do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you'll be able to test and approve what God's will is for you. The third thing as well that we pick up from this is our insecurities, our unchecked insecurities. You see, the leaders of the Jews, they are also experts of the law, and they are charged with ensuring that justice prevailed. But they have deep hatred and insecurity by what Jesus is doing here. The insecurity leading them to coach witnesses. They establish a kangaroo court in a private house under the cover of darkness. Is this justice? You see, they cannot see because they are blind that Jesus, in essence, is the fulfillment of the law and the prophets. And they're the ones who are reading these laws every single day. It is blindness, my brothers and sisters. It is unfortunate that they are willing to unjustly kill, even after Herod and Pilate says, this man is not guilty. It's even shameful that in their blindness, only one person hears the word of God, and that is Pilate's wife. These are but few examples. Many things blind us and distort our decision-making process. And maybe a question to us: is your vision clouded by past experiences and hurts? Is your vision clouded because of your upbringing? Is your vision clouded because of your looks? Is your vision clouded because of the theological foundations? We can agree that we can all be better and healthier if we allow God to reveal our blindness and the impact that it continues to have not only on us, but the people around us. And my prayer is that as we reflect on this, that the Lord will open our eyes to see clearly, that we'll be able to love God and love our neighbors as ourselves. And unlike the Israelites, we will submit to the Lord as the King over our lives. The second thing is, apart from the graveness of this, is the impact of our choices. The truth is that we are here this morning because we made a choice to be here. There are many things that you could be doing right now. But there are people who don't have the same understanding. Some of them are blind to the things that God has opened our eyes to. It is for the same reason that Paul will constantly to pray for the church of Ephesians. And he says, I pray that the eyes of your heart may be enlightened, in order that you may know the hope to which he has called you, the riches of his glorious inheritance in his holy people, and his incomparably great power for us who believe. That is in Ephesians 1, verse 18 to 19. Essentially, Paul is saying there is a direct link between the opening of your eyes and the knowledge of God. As you know God more, it becomes easier to not only intentionally grow deeper in our walk with God, but also to become fruitful in that work. These effects manifest in our daily decision. From our main scripture, you see God is trying to open the eyes of the Israelites in their demand for the king. He paints a clear picture of what the reign of a human king will look like. The expectation is that the Israelites will reconsider their decision, but they don't. And Israel gets into a new phase of suffering, including being taken into captivity. Pilate, on the other hand, is very clear that there are no grounds to crucify and kill Jesus. He even offers them what will be a very clear choice, a murderer or Jesus, but they choose in line with their blindness. This underpins the fact that we cannot leave our choices to be made from our blindness. We should, in essence, prioritize knowing which blindness it is that we are suffering from and how we can have our eyes opened. No good choices can be made when we are holding stereotypes. And as Margaret says, when we are holding grudges, when we are holding hate, when we are holding pains, when we are holding anger and insincerity. It is important to note that the impact of our choices is not limited to us, but directly and indirectly affect others. Just like the sons of Samuel, as they took bribe, they sided with the oppressor. Justice was denied to the poor and the weak. I imagine that part of the feelings in the families that were denied justice was revenge, was anger. And this essentially opens a door for more impaired decisions. I'll encourage us to take a moment sometimes to just stop and think about the decisions that we make. And we ask God, what is really driving or influencing these decisions? Like in the days of Samuel, God is reminding us that unlike the human kings and those things that we esteem in our lives, He is a good God. He is the ultimate giver. He is the one that serves. He is the one that establishes. He is the one that leads from the front, and He is the one that binds the wounded. He's the only one who can offer forgiveness and cleanse us from all our unrighteousness. He's the one who can preserve us as we put our lives in Him. Even as we end our sharing this morning, I would like to recall the words of Moses to the Israelites. After he'd given the Israelites the laws, this is what Moses says in Deuteronomy 30, verses 19 to 20. This day I call the heavens and the earth as witnesses against you, that I have set before you life and death, blessings and curses. Now choose life. Believers, let's choose life, so that you and your children may live, and that you may love the Lord your God. You may listen to his voice and hold fast to him. For the Lord is your life, and he will give you many years in the land he swore to your fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So, Hope Free Church, this morning I want to encourage us. Let's choose right. Let's choose life. Let's cry out to God that he will not only bring about healing for those things that we are suffering from, but he'll also open up our eyes that we can see clearly and walk in the way that he desires. God bless you all, and I will hand it to our Pastor Cray, who will come and pray and close for us. Thank you.